My apologies, everybody. My apologies. I'm over here scrambling to get myself together because I entered this unprepared. I entered my live stream unprepared. And I always told myself, proper preparation prevents poor performance. So I just had y'all waiting for what? 8 minutes? 8 minutes too long. My apologies. Copper Color King is here now. We in this bad boy. Ready to talk some more historical facts, some more historical information. And just ready to get into the nitty gritty, man. Get into the stuff that they kept hidden. The things that they don't teach us about or that they didn't teach us about. The important facts and details that make up the true history of this American continent or this American homeland that we live on, including the islands, South America, North America. We're going to throw Canada up in there, Central America. All that, man. I mean, America is the true motherland. Like, that's why they told history from that perspective, from his perspective. That's why they call it history, is because we just imagine what the world would look like if everybody on this earth found out or discovered that history was told in reverse. And I won't even say in reverse. I'll say more so like, they left things out that connect religions, mythologies, lands, oceans, like huge bodies of water like Atlantic, Pacific. Those are new names. Like the countries we have now, new names. The borders, all of these things are new. So just imagine if everybody just discovered that Egypt used to be here in America. Right? And just imagine if everybody just one day woke up and realized that Atlantis was the body of land that separated America from Europe and Africa. Imagine everybody just woke up and realized that the farthest East Asia you could go is America, the West Coast. Right? Just imagine if everybody woke up and really got on that type of time. It'd change the game. Like, that'd change everything. Right? They won't be able to feed us any more lies, any more bull crap, right? Like one of the biggest ones that I've actually just discovered, right? Christopher Columbus was a black man. Christopher Columbus was a black man. He was a Moor. Columbo was a Moor who came over here to America with other Moors who needed work because they were left unemployed after the crown captured Grenada and ended the Moorish rebellion in Europe. The Moorish conquest in Europe. Right? Columbus was one of them dudes who was banging out with them copper-colored peoples. Right? And probably switched sides. Right? He was a prisoner to the crown. He was a slave. He was a lackey. He wasn't somebody who was held with great reverence. Like, oh, that's Christopher Columbus. Bow to him. Right? And then on top of that, they make his name so popular, but we forget about the Penafilio Navarezes, the Juan de Verrazanis, Verrazano, Juan Ponce De Leon, Juan Ponce from Leon. Right? They don't teach us about the Diego Columbuses, the Diego Salazars, these different men who have Moorish ancestry coming over here to America and conquering different lands and whatever the case may be. They don't teach us about that stuff. But guess what, man? Copper Color King gonna teach y'all. I ain't gonna teach y'all. I'm not even gonna say it like that because I'm not a teacher. We gonna learn together. And then through that, we gonna teach the world. For everybody who tuned into my videos, I want y'all to understand that one thing. I am not a teacher, right? I am not a professor. I'm not one of them. Nah, I learn just as much as everybody else. And I learn right along with everybody else, right? There's no separation in the masses. Right, but with that being said, man, talk too much, man. Let's get right into this bad boy, man. So, first and foremost, I want to introduce to y'all this brother, Juan Ponce De Leon. Juan Ponce De Leon. Juan Ponce from Leon. That's where the De Leon comes from. Why is Juan Ponce De Leon important? Well, we could say this, right? Juan Ponce De Leon is the first ethnically Caucasian, white, if anybody would say Spaniard, to step foot in Puerto Rico. Not Christopher Columbus. As a matter of fact, it's so real that Columbus went to Puerto Rico, made friends with the inhabitants, and then stepped forward in the name of love, searching for other land. And when he went back to stake his claim on Puerto Rico, Juan Ponce De Leon had already subjugated the island. To make matters worse, or to make it even more interesting, those two brothers almost got into an all-out brawl over Puerto Rico. Which proves one thing. Tension amongst ranks and a difference in opinion or approach, which has roots that goes back to their homeland. Columbus came to the Americas with other prisoners who were offered work, like I said. Ponce came on behalf of the crown directly. So we're going to learn a little bit about Juan Ponce De Leon, like I said, and his role in the conquest of Puerto Rico. He is the man who introduced the first Repartimientos in Puerto Rico. So technically speaking, he is the man responsible for the slavery in Puerto Rico. Not Christopher Columbus. Is Juan Ponce De Leon. So what does it say? While searching for the mythical Fountain of Youth, which they did find in Bahamas, Juan Ponce De Leon founded the oldest settlement in Puerto Rico and landed on the mainland of North America, a region he dubbed Florida. He also discovered Florida. Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce De Leon led a European expedition for gold, which eventually brought him to the southeast coast of what would become the United States. He gave Florida its name and went on to become the first governor of Puerto Rico. Ponce de Leon was born into a poor yet noble family in Santervas de Campos, Spain, in 1460. He served as a page at the court of Aragon, where he learned social skills, religion, and military tactics. He even became a soldier and fought against the Moors in Granada. And like other conquistadors, Ponce de Leon soon sought fame and fortune through exploration. It is believed he began his conquest as part of Christopher Columbus's second expedition in 1493, which is fact. All of these men came over here together at one point. During his later explorations, he employed the skills and tactics he learned in the military to subdue and control the native peoples of the Caribbean. Right? Look, he employed the skills and tactics he learned in the military to subdue and control the native peoples of the Caribbean. He was the man responsible for the enslavement of the native peoples of the Caribbean. In the first decade of 1500, Ponce de Leon built settlements in Hispaniola, modern-day Haiti, the Dominican Republic, started farms, constructed defenses in hopes of establishing an island colony for Spain. His efforts paid off and he prospered well, selling produce and livestock to Spanish ships returning home. After helping suppress a native Carib uprising in Hispaniola, in 1504, Ponce de Leon was named the provincial governor of the eastern part of the country. On a return trip to Spain around this time, he married a woman named Leonora, with whom he would eventually have 3 children. But hearing persistent reports of gold on nearby Puerto Rico, in 1508, the Spanish crown eventually sent Ponce de Leon to explore the island. Some accounts speculate his ambitions may have led him to unofficially explore the area 2 years earlier. He took 50 soldiers, a single ship, settling near what is now San Juan. A year later, he returned to Hispaniola, having found much gold and opportunity. The expedition was deemed a success, and he was named the governor of Puerto Rico. They stole the gold from the Taino people. And we're going to actually learn about that going through this entire series, whatever case may be. There's a lot of stuff that we got to touch bases on, man, because right, they glorify Columbus, one, right? That just makes us, that confuses people, because now you over here thinking Columbus was the one responsible for all of that stuff, and it wasn't even him. If anything, Columbus came to the island trying to he was trying to be friendly with some of the inhabitants. Some. Ponce de Leon came to America and straight up, nah, all of y'all are slaves. All of y'all. So even though we don't give no flowers to any of them, right? If you ask me, it's fuck both of them. It's just that, why y'all never told us about Juan Ponce de Leon, right? Why y'all never told us what about Christopher Columbus made him so unimportant in y'all eyes, but y'all wanted to make him so important in our eyes? Because on their end, they didn't give a hoot about Columbus. I promise y'all. I promise y'all. And we gonna learn, right? So real quick, just want to show y'all, this is a map of Juan Ponce de Leon's voyage throughout the Americas, right? He came out to Florida, circled around, came down Cuba, spent through Hispaniola, and returned back to Puerto Rico. While in that same time, enslaving inhabitants of these islands and the mainland of Florida. This is where we get terms like Spanish Indians from. And you had martyrdom throughout Florida in the 1500s. Like, they were colored people too. Right? They were colored people too. And it's just stuff that we can never let fade away in the dust, right? This is where all of this stuff started. We could trace our ancestry and our trauma way past the African slave trade, right? They got their trauma, right? Those folks got their trauma, and the people with that bloodline also have that trauma with them. But we have a trauma that sits with us, that been sitting with us now for the last 600 years, 700 years. And we could count farther back than that. We talking in terms of the lost tribes, man. 600 years though. From 1500 till let's just say 2020. So sorry, 520 years. They've been on our heels for 520 years. And now you don't know who you are. You don't know exactly what you're dealing with. You don't know who's the enemy. The enemy look just like you. That's how confusing it is. right? You would think that you able to, you know, use discernment to pick out the rights and wrongs and who stand with us and who don't. But the enemy, right? It's hard to figure out who the enemy is because of all of this mix up. I call it a mix up, right? But like I said, man, so we're going to learn a little bit about Juan Ponce De Leon. But real quick, right, I just want to introduce two articles to y'all. This is coming back from the history of Puerto Rico. This is chapter 3, where they talk about Juan Ponce De Leon and a man by the name of, let's see if we can find. I know they got his name is Cerrone, but I forgot. I read through it though, obviously, and they made some pretty interesting statements in this little part, this little paragraph that they got here, this little chapter. And then we also got this one from the history of Hernando de Soto's records of exploring the southeastern coast of the United States and the Caribbean islands. So this is the one I really want to dial in on. And then after we get through this, I'm actually going to go through this one. And then we could like cross-reference the different things that we see in both articles. Like I say, when I like to read stuff, I always like to see like, okay, if they said one thing in this book, right, in the next book, are they making the same claim? Like, right, if it's different claims, then we know that somebody not telling the truth. But if all articles and context and books and bibliographies, books and resources and references, if all of those different things align, man, then we know what we dealing with, man. We can use the discernment that Yah has given us, that has blessed us with, to be able to decide for ourselves what truth is, right? But let's just lean into it real quick. So this comes from chapter 4. Like I said, 1500s, 1509 is really pretty much the real start. Like, the discovery of America was 1492, 1493, but things didn't heat up until the 1500s, right? Till the year 1500. So we're going to go through it. Let's check it out. So what it says Columbus and what it do real quick. Milestone Thoughts, you in the building. Happy you tapped in for this one. And sis, you here for it, man. I'm happy you tuned into the new channel. Thank you for subscribing. We still got some work to do together. I ain't forget about that. Let's get into it though. So yeah, what it say? It says Columbus discovered Puerto Rico in 1493 and changed the name of Borinquen, which the Indians gave to it, to that of John the Baptist. He stopped there some days in a bay to the west. This island was neglected until 1508. They neglected Puerto Rico until 1508. When Juan Ponce de Leon, about the year 1509, conquered the island, he founded a town upon the borders of the sea, in a place very convenient for vessels, to which he gave the name of Port of Rico, rich port. That's the origin of the name, because it was a easily accessible port. Puerto Rico was like a trading hub. Like, you could pretty much get there, get whatever goods you need from America, and then bring it back to Spain. That's what they was doing. They weren't bringing Africans with them from Spain to America. They were coming from Spain with their servants to America and then taking the inhabitants back to Spain. So like I said, this is the year 1500. There's people that got their blood that could go back to that far in Puerto Rico, who probably got cousins in Spain and wouldn't even know. Because of Juan Ponce de Leon. Not because of Christopher Columbus, because of Juan Ponce de Leon. The island has in consequence taken the same name. Juan Ponce De Leon was a native of Leon in Spain. That's where he get his name from. From an early age, he had been schooled to war and had served in various campaigns against the Moors of Granada. He accompanied Columbus on his second voyage in 1493, having distinguished himself in various battles with the Indians, and acquired a name for sagacity. What's this word right here? Let's check it out. All right, we're going to go over that, but maybe y'all could drop it in the comments. Let me know. As well as valor. He received a command subordinate to Juan de Escobar in the campaign against Higüey, and so valiantly seconded his chief in that expedition that, after subjugation of the province, he was appointed to the command of it as lieutenant of the governor of Hispaniola. He had not been long in tranquil command of the province of Higüey before he began to cast a wistful eye towards the green mountains of Orgins, which was built 12 or 14 leagues distant. The Indians of the two islands frequently visited each other, and in this way Ponce received intelligence that the mountains of Orgins abounded in gold. Right? Two things to point out. The Caribs and the Tainos of Hispaniola were in cahoots with the Caribs and Tainos of Puerto Rico, Cuba, Jamaica, all of those islands. Like, they were all in sync. And then on top of that, all of these men were expert seafarers. Like, they could sail the hell out of some boats, right? They knew how to build gigantic canoes. And we're not talking about these small ones. Like I always say, if y'all check out my History of the Caribs video, I talk about all of that stuff. But these dudes, right, were super duper smart. And they had mad gold. Mad gold, right? They weren't savages. They weren't none of that crazy stuff that they like to describe these folks as. None of that. Like, none of that applies to these people of these islands, right? They were actually rich, family men, family women, smart, knew how to, they knew how to live with the little that they had. On top of that, the islands were already always constantly being smacked with hurricanes back to back to back to back to back. And these people were still able to survive through those hardships, living off the land. So just imagine that. Land gets smacked with a hurricane, everything is destroyed, and now you got to build yourself back up. And these people specialize in rebuilding, right? This is why they knew how to rebel. They knew how to fight, right? They were experts at going to war, right? All of this stuff, it was already embedded in the DNA. And what I always say to myself, that it has a source, right? It has a source. These people come from a place where people knew how to fight and defend themselves and live and thrive off the land, right? It comes from a source. So it's not like they were savages and just didn't have it all together or whatever the case may be, right? So, but yeah, he asked of the governor of Ovando permission to visit it, and having obtained it, and by the way, Higüey is the ancient name for the Dominican Republic. It's a city in DR. Higüey, the ancient name, for those who don't know, but just had to mention that real quick. But yeah, he asked the governor of Ovando permission to visit it, and having obtained it, he equipped a caravel and embarked for it with about 100 armed soldiers. He landed upon the coast, which belonged to a cacique named Aguijana. And this Aguijana could be the same man who I'm going to speak about a little later in this series, that they make reference to in this book. Aguijana, who actually went to war with Ponce, right? He went to war with Ponce and was murking dudes off left and right until they hit him with like an arrow, and that was like the end of it. They hit him with like a missile, something like that. But if I'm not mistaken, they got the name wrong. It's either wrong here and right in the other one, or right in the other one and wrong in this one. But it's either Guayabana or Aguijana, one of them. but he was the richest and most powerful of the island. Boy used to walk around Puerto Rico with the big bust down gold chain on his neck. The gold chain with the copper gold plate. Double copper gold plate. And they make a description of this later in the history of Puerto Rico book. But they had gold, like gold necklaces. They were making watches, all sorts of stuff like that. Like wild different stuff that it's not there no more, right? These dudes took it and went back to the other side with it. That's what happened. That's what happened with all of these relics. They took them and went back to the other side. Right, so let's see where we at. Yeah, he was the most richest of the island. The Spaniards were received with great remarks of friendship. The cacique, believing that he could not better prove it to them than in adopting the name of him who appeared to be their general, caused himself to be named Juan Ponce De Leon. He took some name. That's what they used to do. They would switch names, right? They would switch names. Very, very, very interesting to note. Like when they would encounter one another, even in war, when one would be dying, they would like switch names. Like, and I don't know what's the reason for it. Like maybe people could give me more information on that, but very, very, very interesting. And it was a part of their tradition. So yeah, but he conducted his guests into all parts of the island. And upon the borders of two rivers, Matubon and Zebuco, whose sands were mingled with much gold, Ponce then hastened to carry this happy news to Ovando. He left a part of his people on the island who were very well treated by the natives during his absence. As soon as he arrived at San Domingo, and make note of this too, right? When he dipped, everything was okay, right? Everything was good, right? He was taking the gold. Everybody was friends. Make note of that, right? Because it's going to get spooky. As soon as he arrived in San Domingo, he solicited of Ovando the government of the island of Borinquen, which was granted him. He then, preparatory to the conquest of the island, made a visit there to make himself acquainted with the nature and resources of the inhabitants. He found the companions who he had left there in good health and spirits, and full of gratitude towards Agihana, who had treated them with undiminished hospitality. After remaining some time on the island, he returned to San Domingo, but to his surprise, he found the whole face of affairs had changed during his absence. The governor, Ovando, had been recalled to Spain, and Diego Columbus, son of the renowned discoverer, appointed in his place, besides a cavalier, Cristobal de Sotomayor. Right, so Columbus' son basically took over the government in Haiti, right? That was like the center of government for the Spanish at this time, and over here in the Americas, it was Haiti. And they recalled the current governor and appointed Diego Columbus, the son of Christopher Columbus, as governor of the Spanish hierarchy in the islands. Already arrived from Spain, empowered by the king to form a settlement and build a fortress on the island of Puerto Rico, Diego Columbus was highly displeased with this act of the king as derogatory to his prerogative as viceroy to be consulted all to appointments made within his jurisdiction. He therefore refused to put Sotomayor in possession of the island and paid as little respect to the claims of Juan Ponce De Leon. Diego Columbus, Christopher Columbus' son, was on some screw the crown, right? Screw Ponce and screw Sotomayor. Screw all y'all. Right? He was stepping like he didn't really care. Like, it makes you think, like, what kind of household was he raised under? If Christopher Columbus was so devoted to the crown, why was his son disrespecting them like that? Right? Why was his son disrespecting their authority? Right? Real G. I'm gonna call it for what it is. I'm gonna call it for what it is. Listen, buddy, you're a real G for that one. Get on their heels 24/7. Get on their heels all the time. That's what we gonna do. But yeah, Ponce and Sotomayor. Oh wait, hold on. He paid little respect to the claims of Juan Ponce De Leon. He chose officers to suit himself, appointing Juan Cerrón to the government of Puerto Rico and Miguel Diaz to be his lieutenant. Ponce and Sotomayor bore their disappointment with a good grace, and in hopes of improving their fortunes, joined the crowd of adventurers who accompanied the new governor to the island. New changes soon took place, for when Ovando, on his return to Spain, made favorable representation of the merits and services of Ponce. The king appointed him governor of Puerto Rico, and signified specifically that Diego Columbus should not presume to displace him. So like I said, right, here's the mix-up. So Juan Ponce, right, being made the governor of Puerto Rico, right? Diego Columbus was assigned the seat in Haiti. But the crown told him that Ponce shall remain the governor of Puerto Rico, and you shall not step on his toes. Diego Columbus wasn't with that, right? So look, Ponce then, 1509, fitted out quite a considerable armament and repaired there, but he did not find much facility in establishing himself there as he had anticipated. Aguijana had died during his absence, but his brother did not like the Spaniards as much as he. Nevertheless, so his brother was Guayabana, right? Guayabana. 2 caciques. Nevertheless, Ponce commenced building a town called Capara, which he founded on the northern side of the island, about a league from the sea. It was in front of the port called Rico, right? Port of Rico, which subsequently gave its name to the island. The road to this town was up a mountain through a dense forest, and so rugged and miry that it was the bane of man and beast. Ponce, being firmly seated in his government, began to distribute the natives into repartimientos, and had been done in the island of San Domingo, as had been done. See, Ponce started the slavery of the inhabitants. I'm trying to tell people, man. When I talk this talk, I keep it a buck. Ponce, not Columbus, right? They liked Columbus. Ponce redistributed the natives into repartimientos, as had been done in the island of San Domingo. Then the gentleness of the Indians was changed into rage. They went from gentle into savage, quote unquote, after Ponce distributed them into repartimientos, labor camps, right? However, they still regarded the Spaniards as gods descended from heaven, which restrained them. But they sought every possible means to deliver themselves from a yoke which was insupportable to them. Now, this whole gods thing comes from the Spaniards and them having like knowledge of astrology and all of that. This is why they calling them gods, because these people, their time, they're still stuck in a time where that's the language, right? Astrology is the language, right? Around this time, the Spaniards, they already getting into mathematics and writing and map making and all of this stuff. Like, they doing stuff that the folks over here haven't, and I don't want to say it without knowing for sure, because those things could exist out there and we not know. But any use of any maps, right? Like the compass originated over here in America. So they were using compass-like items and not maps, or we didn't have a writing system, right? We still were using hieroglyphs and writings on stone and whatever the case may be. It wasn't no writing on paper or anything. They were already up on that at this time, 1500s. So one thing I always want to make people understand is that the discovery, quote unquote, of America, 1493, is not as old as what they make it seem, or what people may think it seems like. Like, the Mongolian conquest is older than the discovery of America, right? There's a lot of different points and periods of time that are way older than Christopher Columbus's discovery of America. So that means it's a lot of stuff that was going on long before 1492 or even 1509, right? Long before. So for them to look at these guys or consider them to be gods only comes from the fact that the Europeans or Spaniards had knowledge of a lot of stuff without even being able to look at the stars, or being able to being able to accurately time, I don't know how to explain it, but just different things happening within astrology or space and time, or whatever the case may be. And that knowledge was like, oh wow, like, you know that? Oh, you must be a god. Not because they were like, oh God, when you come over here, we praise you, your white skin and how you dressed and all of that, like how they make it seem. It wasn't like that. That's cap, right? That's bullpark, right? That's to make it look good. That's to make the scenario sound better, but that's not what it is, y'all. And I'm here to tell y'all that first and foremost. Like, so let's continue though, right? So it says, they assembled secretly and decided that it was necessary to know positively if the strangers were immortal. One of the caciques, named Breyu or Breyon, was charged with this commission, right? He soon acquitted himself of it. So what they did was they found a young man lingering, a young Spaniard named Salido or Salesdo, traveled to his house and remained there for several days to rest himself. When he wished to leave, Breyu had him accompanied by several Indians, whom he charged to carry his pack and to aid him on different roads. Having arrived at the river, an Indian charged with secret orders by the cacique took him by his shoulders to carry him across the stream. But when he arrived in the middle of the river, he allowed himself to fall with the Spaniard. The other Indian who accompanied him then joined him to prevent the Spaniard from rising. They drowned the little boy. They drowned him to see if he would live, but he died. So that made them see, like, okay, they're not really gods. See, like, when they perceived that he no longer moved, they drew his body upon the shore. Nevertheless, fearing that he was not dead, they made excuses to him for having let him swallow so much water, protesting that this accident grieved them and that they had all made haste to assist him. So he didn't die. While they held this discourse, they did not cease to turn him and to observe if he gave any signs of life. He did die, sorry y'all. They remained 3 days with the dead body performing this comedy. Finally, seeing that the corpse began to petrify, they went to inform Breyu of what had happened. But what's interesting is, what do you mean a corpse is petrifying? Like let's just look at right? Look at it, right? Like, look at it. So corpses was really turning to stone, right? Oh, okay. It began to rot and decay. So what they did was they sat with Sun for 3 days just to confirm his death, to make sure that these people were not gods. Right? Very, very interesting, right? They went this far to confirm their ungodliness. All of this just because folks in them know how to tell astrology and time and mathematics and whatnot, which they learned from other colored people, right? This is what makes it so freaking interesting, right? So interesting, because if the folks over here is stuck on the old ways and then the folks over there is on the new ways, then that means the people who know the new ways learned it from the folks who know the old ways. So which means that, could it all have came out of America to begin with? Like, think about it. Just think about it. That's what I want people to do. Think about it. Just think about it, man. Just think about it. But yeah, so, and yeah, I'm late, but yeah, Columbus' brother was a cartographer. I think I heard something like that. They're gonna talk about that actually too once I get into the biography and the journals of Christopher Columbus. Then we're gonna talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, so they went to inform Brayu of what had happened. He wished to convince himself personally of the fact to inform the other caciques of the island. The islanders, undeceived of the pretended immortality of the Spaniards, resolved to make way with them. Their precautions were so well taken that they surprised the Spaniards without defense, and massacred about 100 of them before the others knew the danger that had threatened them. In arranging the massacre of those within his own domains, Agahana assigned to one of the inferior caciques the task of surprising the village of Sotomayor, giving him 3,000 warriors for that purpose. He was to assail the village at midnight, to set fire to the houses, and to slaughter all the inhabitants. He, however, proudly reserved himself the honor of killing Sotomayor. This cavalier had won the affections of the daughter of an Indian chief. She had heard enough of the war council to learn that Sotomayor was in danger. She told him all that she knew and feared and warned him to be upon his guard. But Sotomayor disregarded her warnings, right? And disregard this right here, right? Like this, it just frustrated me because it's like, why? Like, why? Why turn your back on your own people like that? Because they fighting, because your brothers, sisters, and aunts and uncles and whatnot, they get enslaved, right? They're being enslaved, right? But this lady, right, would end up becoming one of the wives of these Spaniards, right? Passing the bloodline through. Like, it was a lot of them like this. And this is how they managed to intermarry and mix in. You know, it was happening with the males too, you know. And the same way we would call it Uncle Sam, that's what you would call one of these folks, right? A Karen, a Uncle Sam of that time, right? And it exists in every culture, right? So let's continue. Not only just a white and black thing. About the same time, a Spaniard versed in the language and customs of the natives had observed a number of them gathering together one evening, painted and decorated as for battle. Suspecting some lurking mischief, he stripped and painted himself in their manner, and favored by the darkness of night, mingled among them undiscovered, right? He was able to, like, mask himself to fit right in, right? And it'll take more than just paint, right? It'll take more than just paint, right? This takes physical features, a whole lot of stuff for you to be able to fit in, right? Especially if all of these folks, so-called, quote unquote, all of them look Asian, right? Or they look Chinese, right? It's easy to tell a Spaniard from an Asian person, right? You would be able to make that differentiation. But what if it was a colored person that may have curly hair and possibly a beard, and another colored person with curly hair and a beard, right? It would be hard to make that differentiation, or to make that to differ between the two. It would be hard to do that. It would take more than paint. I'll tell you now, let a white person come up on me or pull up with white paint or black paint stripes across his face, or just a white person that's painted black to begin with. I would be able to tell, like, dude, you're not black, right? You're You're not copper colored. So think about that. That's another one to think about, right? How was he able to fit in so well, right? To be able to do what he about to do. Look, check this out. They were assembled around a fire, performing their mystic war dances. They repeatedly mentioned the name of Sotomayor. The Spaniard withdrew unperceived and hastened to apprise Sotomayor of his danger, who revolved during the night the warnings which he had received, determined to repair in the morning to Capara, the stronghold of Ponce. But in the morning he had imprudence to ask Agujana for Indians to carry his baggage, and departed slightly armed, accompanied by only 3 Spaniards. Right, so he was able to observe everything, right? Damn near everything, and make it back safely to give his folks, to give the other Spaniards the drop on what these Indians over there preaching, right? They preaching over there to murder Sotomayor. That's like a war cry, like we gonna kill Sotomayor, right? They dissing they dead ops, basically, not even dead, right? But they're perceiving him to be dead, and they dissing him in the moment. So dude was pretty much able to observe all of that and get away without anybody realizing, like, hey, he's not one of us, despite black paint stripes or whatever striped paint is on himself. Whatever paint is on his body. But yeah, so the cacique watched his departure and set out shortly afterwards with a few chosen warriors, dodging his steps at a distance through the forest. They had not proceeded far when they met a Spaniard named Juan Gonzalez, who spoke the Indian language. They immediately assailed him and wounded him in several places. He threw himself at the feet of the cacique and implored his life. The chief spared him for the moment, being eager to overtake Sotomayor. He stealthily approached him through the forest and suddenly, rushing with his warriors upon him, gave him a blow with his war club that fell him to the earth, when he was quickly dispatched with repeated blows. The Spaniards that accompanied him shared the same fate. So they popped on Sotomayor and packed him up, right? They packed up Sotomayor. They got him out the way. When Agujana had glutted his vengeance on this unfortunate cavalier, he returned in quest of Juan Gonzalez. But the latter had recovered sufficiently from his wounds to climb a tree and conceal himself among its branches, right? They went after this guy, and he got away by climbing a tree and hiding in the branches. Fortunately, Agujana and the other Indians did not think of looking up into the tree, but after searching all surrounding forests, gave up the search and left. But Gonzalez, though they had departed, did not venture from his concealment until night. He then descended and made the best of his way to certain Spaniards, where his wounds were dressed, when he immediately repaired to Capara and informed Juan Ponce De Leon of the danger that threatened him. In the meantime, the savages had destroyed the village of Sotomayor. They approached it unperceived through the forest, and entering at the dead of night, set fire to the straw-thatched roofs and attacked the Spaniards as they endeavored to escape from the flames. Several were slain at the onset, but a brave Spaniard, Diego de Salazar, right, he's going to be very important, rallied his countrymen to beat off the enemy and succeeded in conducting the greater part of them, though sorely mangled and harassed, to Capara. Scarcely had these fugitives gained the fortress when others came hurrying from all quarters, bringing similar tales of conflagration and massacre. All of the villages on the island founded by the Spaniards had been surprised, about 100 of their inhabitants destroyed, and the survivors forced to take refuge in Capara, right? One thing to make note of. I tell everybody all the time, this is how you know they were really riding out and banging out. I tell people all the time. All of that oh, they came over here and conquered and took over. This is 1509. You telling me these folks can't even fortify some shit in 1509? They almost 20 years into being in America, and they still ain't figure it out. That's how powerful folks were. And this is why I say, like, we got to understand, man. They paint the picture as if people were just out here helpless and weak, right? Couldn't defend themselves. They just didn't know how to thrive. What you mean? Every settlement you had, we burnt it down. We burned it down. And when I say we, I'm speaking for them, for our Taino brothers and sisters, y'all. They burnt it down. They burned it down. Every settlement on the island, they burnt it down. So check it. Ponce was not easily daunted. He remained ensconced within his fortress, whence he dispatched messengers in all haste to Hispaniola, imploring immediate assistance. Your boy was calling for backup. They tortured him so bad. They tortured these Spaniards so bad. They had him calling for backup. Do y'all understand what this means? Obviously, this is a symbol for who the stronger party is. Who the powerful party, who has the advantage, home court advantage. Like, I remember I made a post a minute ago, and people was like, oh, you talking about this like y'all ain't lose with home court advantage. Well, do you know how long it took for y'all to beat us? With this home court advantage, it took y'all, like, it's almost like Jordan when he won his first championship. He lost all them years, and he needed help. That boy needed some milk. These Spaniards needed some milk in order just to thump with one group of people. Them boys needed some milk. That's crazy, right? It's crazy, y'all. This is crazy. But let's continue. In the meantime, he tasked his wits to divert the enemy and keep them at bay. He divided his little force into 3 bodies of about 30 men each, under the command of Diego Salazar, Miguel de Toro, and Luis de Anasco, and sent them out alternately, to make surprises and assaults, to form ambushes, and to practice the other stratagems of partisan warfare, which he had learned in the early life of his campaigns against the Moors of Granada. Right, the same strategy they used to beat the Moors was the same strategy they had to use to conquer the people here in America. Right, that's another thing to make note of, because these Moors were so powerful, right? So powerful. And they conquered Europe for so long. However, y'all had to resort to the same strategies it took y'all to beat this great nation just to conquer Puerto Rico? Man, them boys is butt, bro. Like, them boys is butt. Straight up. Like, I ain't even gonna lie. Them jits is butt, boy. Like, listen. If I had a nickel for every time I read something like this in one of these books, I'd be up probably like about 55,000. Not even gonna lie to y'all. Right? But look. So let's continue. Where we at? It is said that he could distinguish those of the Indians who were allies from those who were enemies of the Spaniards. Right? He could distinguish. How did they do that? How did they do that? I want y'all to know this is the start of the color game. Right? That's the color game that they's playing at this point when they say that light versus dark, aka white versus black, right? Aka possibly Asians versus Negroes, or Mongolian looking peoples versus Negro looking peoples. Like many different ways you could look at it, but that's the start of these claims right here. So you gotta step over that, dodge it, like Hootie May would be saying, dodge that hijack. But yeah, for the most part, to the former, he was docile and friendly. To the latter, fierce and implacable. He was the terror of the natives who were unaccustomed to powerful and ferocious animals. And he did more service in this wild warfare than several soldiers. His master received for the service of this dog the pay and share of booty assigned to a crossbowman, which was the highest stipend given. At length, Ponce was reinforced by troops from Hispaniola, whereupon he boldly sallied forth to take revenge upon those who had thus held him in this kind of durance. His foe, Orgins, was at that time encamped in his own territory, with more than 5,000 warriors, but in a negligent state, for he knew nothing of the reinforcements of the Spaniards, and supposed Ponce shut up with his hands full of men in Capara. The old soldier took him completely by surprise, and routed him with great slaughter. Orgins, however, stirred up his countrymen and assembled their forces, and by one grand assault to decide the fate of themselves and their island. Ponce received secret tidings of their intent, and of the place where they were assembled. He had at that time barely 80 men at his disposal, but they were cased in steel and proof against the weapons of the savages. Without stopping to reflect, the old cavalier put himself at their head and led them through the forest in quest of the foe. It was nearly sunset when he came in sight of the Indian camp. The sight of the multitude of Indian warriors there made him pause and almost repent of his temerity, right? He was about to repent, right? They had Ponce ready to say, okay, hold up. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to rump with them boys. They're deep, right? And like he just said, they encased in steel and shit, right? They covered in steel and whatnot. They got steel all over their bodies. So it makes you think, right? You got to think about it, right? What kind of people are they dealing with that's putting them through this much pain? Right? Think about it. Y'all covered in steel. However, when you see the multitude of these folks with their clubs, arrows, and whatnot, mind y'all, they naked and you still scared. You still scared. Right? This is 1509. We just gonna sit here and say the conquest of America didn't start until the 1700s. Let's just make that claim, right? 1600s. Sorry. Because these boys they were running away with tails tucked between their butts like dogs. Right? With the way they was getting whipped on. Right? They had Ponce on the ropes. However, ordering some of his men in the advance to skirmish with the enemy, he hastily threw up some breastworks with the rest. When it was finished, he withdrew his forces into it and ordered them to keep merely on the defensive. The Indians made repeated attacks, but were as often repulsed with loss. The cacique, enraged at finding his warriors thus baffled, and finding the night closing in, and fearing that in the darkness the enemy might escape, summoned his choicest warriors, and placing himself at their head, led the way in a general assault. But as he approached the breastworks, he received a mortal wound from an arbusque, and fell dead on the spot, right? The death of Guayabana Aguijana, one of them folks, right? But a Taino cacique, like a big chief, like a copper-colored big chief of the Taino Puerto Rican people, right? They murked him, I guess, with this being like a javelin or arrow or something like that, right? But look, the Spaniards were not at first aware of the importance of the chief they had slain. They, however, soon surmised it from the confusion among the enemy, who bore off the body with great lamentations. It made no further attack. Ponce took advantage of this draw of his small force during the night, happy to get out the terrible jeopardy into which his rash confidence had betrayed him. While Ponce was fighting hard to maintain his sway over the island, King Ferdinand had repented of the step he had taken in superseding the governor and lieutenant governor appointed by Diego Columbus, and becoming convinced that he was infringing the rights of Columbus and that policy and justice required him to retract it, sent back Cerron and Diaz empowered to resume the command of the island. They were, however, ordered on no account to manifest any ill will against Ponce, but to cultivate the most friendly understanding with him. The king also wrote to Ponce explaining to him that this proceeding of the council was not intended as censure upon his conduct, but as a mere act of justice, and that he should be indemnified for the loss of his command. By the time the new governor and lieutenant reached the island, Ponce had completely subjugated it. So, like I said in the beginning, Ponce, the crown, right, they had gave Ponce ownership of Puerto Rico. They gave him ownership, like, you can now be the governor of Puerto Rico. And they gave Diego Columbus the right to Haiti. So now what the crown did was they rescinded on that. They stepped back from that. Like, okay, Cerron and Diaz, y'all got to come back. Diego Columbus got to get his land back, right? And in that process, Ponce is also allowed to keep Puerto Rico. So now, when Diego Columbus and the new governors and lieutenants is coming back for Puerto Rico, Juan Ponce had already subjugated it, right? He had already murked off pretty much all of the people that were trying to fight, and the rest had already assimilated in, right? That's why they say Guayabana, and we're going to learn about this too in the History of Puerto Rico book, he was the last chief to put up any fight. After that, it was over for the island of Puerto Rico, right? It was over. It became a port, and this is when they started shipping in different people from all over the world, right? Asians, Africans, mad different people. And then from Puerto Rico, they would ship these people to different islands or here to America. This island was so populous that the Spaniards would have found extreme difficulty in conquering it if the inhabitants had not been convinced that the new successors, which had arrived from the island of San Domingo without their knowledge, were the same who they had slain who had revived to fight them. This idea caused them to regard resistance as useless. They submitted to the discretion of the conquerors, who employed them in the mines where nearly the whole of them perished. Right? Remember the Repartimiento? Right now, these folks, all of the folks that were under Ponce's Repartimiento, most of them now working in the mines. And this is happening in different islands now. They working in the mines and they jacking at these people as perishing, but really, they really working the men to death, which is true, not going to deny that. They working the men to death, but which I think is happening with the women and children. The fathers is dying. They need somebody to raise the kids, right? And they obviously got a thing for the women, right? So now they become the fathers of these families. And the same thing that they did here in America, the Spanish did with the inhabitants over there in the islands, right? Mixing in, making slaves out of the families, but also having more babies so that they can produce more labor, right? And some people would say that's like slave studs, but in reality, what it is like having a business and just constantly having workers or employees to continue selling your product. So these haciendos, right, these plantation masters, they're really just making employees at this point, right, with what they're doing with the women of the island. And I have another book that actually speaks more about that, but I'm gonna get into that a little bit later. So what they talking about now, check this out. This is very interesting. So it says, Ponce resigned the command of Puerto Rico. The loss of one wild island was of little moment when there was a new world to be shared out, where a soldier like Ponce, with sword and buckler, could readily carve out a fortune for himself. Ponce had now amassed a fortune sufficient to assist him in his plans, and his brain was teeming with most visionary enterprises. Some old Indians had informed him of a country, Bimini, far to the north, abounding in gold and all manner of delights. Ooh wee. Gold and Bimini. Now, Bimini, y'all. Bimini on a map. Bimini is tiny. Bimini is probably about the size of Staten Island. I'm capping. Where the Statue of Liberty is. All right, I'm capping some more. I'm not going to disrespect Bimini like that, but my family is from Bimini. Bimini is a small island. Very, very small, in between Miami and the Bahamas. Now the Tainos over here in Bimini as well. And then you also have Bimini Road, right? The Bimini Road. I don't know if people or anybody heard of this, right? But the Bimini Road, right? Folks is saying this in the conspiracy world. I'm going to call it this conspiracy world because if I call it by my world, people probably not going to understand that. But Bimini Road, folks is saying that's like the road to Atlantis, something like that. But basically, it's a rock formation, and it's called the Bimini Wall. Well, it's basically something of great historic significance, and I'm actually going to research it some more myself. I'm going to have to. And it's over there in the Bahamas. Well, in Bimini. And Bimini is basically the Bahamas. But they saying that in Bimini, there's mad gold and mad manners of delights, all possessing a fountain of such wonderful virtue that whosoever bathed in it would be restored to health and youth. They jacking, they found the fountain of youth in Bimini. In Bimini, y'all. In Bimini, the fountain of youth in Bimini. Right? Real ancient prehistoric stuff, what we talking about right now. The fountain of youth. Now, why would they call that the fountain of youth? I don't know what information or what situation may have had happened back then for the indigenous people to say the fountain of youth is in Bimini. But that's mind-blowing, right? That's mind-blowing. My father's father is from Bimini, right? Bohemian or Biminian. That's what I call it. Biminian. So And I didn't even get to meet him, right? So that means in that history lies the history of that island. And then we learning now that the fountain of youth was in Bimini. That's tough. You had a lot of them folks over there, white Caribbeans. Why? Because at one point we know the English took over, right? The British. And yeah, there are a lot of islands, right? Florida actually used to have a bigger landmass, like a bigger and wider landmass. It used to be more land connected to Florida, but the water kind of covers up most of it now, right? The Florida Keys were even bigger, right? Way bigger. And that connected actually a good portion of Bimini to Florida. And Bimini connected to the Bahamas at one point in time as well. And you could kind of see that, like when you're looking at the map, right? This being Bimini and then that being the Bahamas. And if this is water, then that means water submerged whatever land connected this. All of this over here, water submerged all of it. From Florida to Bimini to the Bahamas. All of this. This was all land. And you could just tell. You could tell. Even in Cuba. You could just tell. You could tell if you swam to the bottom of the ocean, that's where all the land is. Whatever the water covers, that's where all the land is. That's just, you know, that's that right there. So, but yeah, let's see what else. They added that in time past before the arrival of the Spaniards, a large party of the natives of Cuba had departed northward in search of this happy land and of this fountain of life and had never returned. Wonder what happened to them. Ponce, they could have got caught in the Bermuda Triangle. Something to also make note of. Very interesting. Ponce listened to these tales with fond credulity. So fully was he persuaded of the existence of this region of bliss and of this river of life that he fitted out 3 ships at his own expense to sail in search of them. Nor had he had any difficulty in finding adventurers in abundance ready to cruise with him in quest of this fairy land. It is not astonishing that a story so absurd should have found some credit among a simple and ignorant people, such as the natives were, but that it should have been able to make any impression upon enlightened men is that which now appears almost incredible. The fact of it is, however, not the less certain, and the Spanish historians, the most credible, have related these extravagant traits of their credulous fellow countrymen. The Spaniards were at this epoch engaged in a career of activity, which every day revealed to them extraordinary and wonderful objects, which gave a romantic turn to their imaginations, right? They seeing stuff in America that's blowing their mind. Every day. And like how I always say, if that's the situation, and this is what's happening when you come in here, then that just means that what's over there in Europe, you've never seen this over there before. Which brings me back to this. How can you call this the new world when what you see over here, you've never seen over in your old world? Right? So that just means that it is new to you, but old to here. Like it been here. You're just finding out about it. Right? So again, how can you make this the new world when the things you discover, animals, plants, customs, everything is new to you, right? It's new to you, right? If there were scientists at this time, they would literally be conducting experiments on everything. I mean, they stole everything anyway, so obviously experiments come down the line, but it's none of this stuff is new. It's not new. So how can we consider this to be the old world? I mean, the new world. And that's why I always state right? On top of you losing almost every single fight, you've had to rewrite the story so much to the point to where we can't even believe that there are things that are far, far beyond our imagination that have existed here in America, right? They talk about gypsies and the Negritos of Africa all the time. But gypsies and Negritos been here in America ever since. And they were in Brazil. Right? These is facts. These is just all facts that I'm stating. See, look, right? In these delightful countries, nature seemed to present itself under new forms. Every plant, every tree, every animal was different from those of the ancient hemisphere. The Spaniards believed themselves transported to the enchanted countries, and after the wonders which they had already witnessed, and the first ardor of their imagination, there was nothing, however, extraordinary that appeared incredible to them. Okay. Again. That's like saying you saw unicorns and werewolves in America. But y'all been telling them stories over there. So if them mythical animals ain't even as incredible as the basic megatherium or giant sloth or whatever else you may come across here in America, again, we talking about America, the true old world. The land before the time, right? The home of the dragons, right? Giants, right? So much more, right? We might even have Cyclops, right? Did y'all know, and I mentioned this in the older video, but there's a race of giants from Ohio that died off due to syphilis? That's so crazy. They died off due to syphilis in the year 1307. And yes, the true land of milk and honey. They call Haiti the land of milk and honey. Possibly, my brother. Possibly. There is a possibility. Right? They do drink blood and stuff like that now, right? I ain't gonna get in. I mean, we ain't gonna do too much, but you know, I'm just saying. But anyway, yeah. They believed they was transported to an enchanted realm, right? A realm with unicorns and flying dogs and giant sloths and mammoths. I mean, sorry, I call them mammoths. I forgot what's the other word for them, but I always talk about them all the time, right? Them big elephant thingies. But yeah, those things and a whole bunch of other stuff, right? This is the stuff that they see and they saying that is apparent incredible to them. If a rapid succession of new and astonishing scenes made such an impression upon the intelligent mind of Columbus that he boasted of having found the seat of paradise, we ought not to deem it strange that Ponce expected to discover the fountain of youth. On the 3rd of March 1512, Ponce sailed with three ships from the port of Saint Germain and the island of Puerto Rico. For some distance he kept along the coast of Hispaniola, and then stretching away to the northward, made for the Bahama Islands, Lucayas or Los Cayos. He visited one island after another, until on the 14th of the month he arrived at Guayahani, or St. Salvador, the island where Columbus first landed in the New World, Friday, October 12, 1492. St. Salvador was called Guanahani. That's the original name for St. Salvador. His inquiries for the island of Bimini and the Fountain of Youth were all in vain. Still, he was not discouraged. Having repaired his vessels, he again put to sea and steered his course to the northwest. On Sunday, the 27th of March, he came in view of a more extensive range of land that he had previously seen. It was crowned with magnificent forests, intermingled with flowering shrubs and vines, which presented an enchanting prospect. In navigating along its shores, his ships were violently agitated by the currents arising from the action of the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream always acting up, right? Praying for my folks down south. I hope everybody get through that. But the Gulf Stream always acting up, right? Which rushes here with concentrated force through the Bahama channels, and from which he gave to the southern cape the name of currents, corrientes, currents. He continued hovering about it for several days until the night of the 2nd of April. He succeeded in coming to an anchor under the land of 30 degrees, 8 inches of north latitude. I think that's 8 inches, right? The whole country was in the fresh bloom of spring. The trees, sealed with vines, were gay with blossoms and fragrant with delicious odors. The fields were covered with flowers, and from which circumstance, as well as having discovered it on Palm Sunday, Pascua, Florida, he gave it the name of Florida, right? This was the description of Florida. A sis. Florida. And wait, and which video you talking about? Which video you talking about? Refresh my memory. I'll be getting lost in thought. But yeah, this is the discovery of Florida. This is when Ponce de Leon first discovered Florida, right? This is the description, right? They seeing beautiful trees, right, and flowers, and they had fragrant, delicious odors and whatnot. Things again that they have not discovered or have seen over there in their ancient world. Ponce landed and took possession of the country in the name of the Castilian sovereigns. He afterwards continued for several weeks raging the coast. He doubled Cape Canaveral and reconnoitred the southern and western shores, still believing that it was an island. In all his attempts to explore the country, he met with resolute and implacable hostility from the Indians, right? They wasn't jacking him in Florida. He was disappointed also in his hopes of finding gold and the fountain of rejuvenation. Convinced, therefore, that it was not the land of Indian tradition, he turned his prow homeward on the 14th of June. In the outset of his return, he discovered a group of islands abounding in seafowl and marine animals. On one of them, his sailors, in the course of a single night, caught 170 turtles. Turtles are aboriginal to America, just to let y'all know, and might have taken more. To this group, Ponce gave the name Tortugas, or turtles, right? This is where turtles get their name from, right? Tortugas, right? Because they discovered 170 reptiles. They took them, and Ponce was like, all right, we're going to call them Tortugas, or turtles. Proceeding on his cruise, he touched at another group of islets near the Lucayos, to which he gave the name of La Viega, old woman, because he found a solitary old woman there whom he'd taken on board to give him information about the labyrinth of islands into which he was entering. For a long time he struggled with all kinds of difficulties and dangers, and was obliged to remain more than a month in one of the islands, to repair the damages which his ship had suffered in a storm. Disheartened at length, he gave up the search in person, and sent in his place Juan Perez de Arturbia, who departed in one of the ships guided by the old woman and another Indian. As to Ponce, he made the best of his way to Puerto Rico. He had not been long in port when Perez likewise arrived, who reported that he had found the long sought for Bimini. They discovered Bimini, right? The fountain of youth. He described it as being large, verdant, and covered with beautiful groves. There were crystal springs and limpid streams in abundance, which kept the island in perpetual verdure, but none that could restore the youth to age. Thus ended the chimerical expedition of Juan Ponce De Leon, right? De Leon now had returned to Spain to make a report of his voyage to King Ferdinand, who conferred on him the title of Adelantado of Bimini in Florida, which last was yet considered an island, right? Florida was considered an island, right? Also, permission was granted him to recruit men either in Spain or in the colonies for a settlement in Florida. But probably discouraged or impoverished by his last expedition, he deferred entering on his command for the present. At another enterprise presented itself to Ponce. The Caribs had become a terror to the Spanish inhabitants of the islands. So frequent were the invasions of the islands of Puerto Rico that it was feared that it would have to be abandoned. In 1514, King Ferdinand ordered that 3 ships, well armed and manned, should be fitted out at Seville to free the seas from these marauders. Yeah, we're going to talk about the history of Florida, definitely. And the one about syphilis, I can actually go, if you go through my videos, it's the history of the Choctaw, Chickasaw, and the Natchez. Or if you go into my history of the Caribs video, I actually talk about it in the beginning of that series, because the term Caribs is a term that they associated with cannibal, and they called these syphilis catching giants Caribs or Atacapas or Atacapai, which mean man-eater or flesh-eater, cannibal, Carib. All of those words, they went hand in hand with one another. But at the end of the day, the craziest part about it is that they all died off from syphilis, right? Which was weird as hell. But yeah, so in 1514, Ferdinand ordered that 3 ships, well armored and manned, should be fitted out at Seville to free the seas from these marauders being the Caribs, right, the seafarers. The command of this armada was given to Ponce. He was instructed in the first place to sail the Caribs of those islands most contiguous and dangerous to Puerto Rico, and then to make war upon those of the mainland in the neighborhood of Cartagena, right? Cartagena, right? I'm going to say that one more time. We're getting biblical form. He was afterwards to take that captaincy of Puerto Rico and attend to the repartimientos of the Indians in conjunction with the person to be appointed by Diego Columbus. Ponce, full of confidence, set sail January 1515 and steered direct for the island of Guadalupe, where he cast anchor and sent men on shore for wood and water and women to wash the clothes of the crew, with a party of soldiers to guard them. While these people were scattered carelessly along the shore, the Caribs rushed from an ambush, killed the greater part of the men, and carried off the women to the mountains, something that these Caribs specialized in. This blow, at the very outset of his expedition, sank deep into the heart of Ponce and put an end to all his military excitement. Caribs packed son up so bad, he said, all right, I can't do this no more. Right? He waved the white flag himself. He said, I can't go through this no more. These boys are savages, right? They be on a different type of time. I don't want it with them, right? The Caribs really was really on a different type of time, but they did it to survive. And they did it because they knew that these Spaniards was over here doing bad to the Tainos, who at one point in time worked hand in hand with the Caribs to kick these people off the island. But anyway, So, what we got? Humbled and mortified, he set sail for the island of Puerto Rico, where under pretext of ill health, he relinquished all further prosecution of the enterprise and gave command of the squadron to Captain Zuniga. Ponce remained in Puerto Rico as governor, where he gave great offense and caused much contention in regard to the Repartimientos, having grown irritable through vexation and disappointment. He continued for several years in that island until the brilliant exploits of Cortez aroused his dormant spirit. Jealous of being eclipsed in his old days, he determined to sally forth one more expedition. He had heard that Florida, which he had hitherto considered a mere island, was a part of the mainland, was a part of America, presenting a great field of enterprise wherein he might make discoveries and conquests, right? Because Cortez had made his way up to the northern part, so he was able to see, like, okay, this is all one body of land. And he went back and he had told Ponce, like, yo, Florida, you know, that place you said was an island? Yeah, I ain't gonna lie, that's one whole body of land. That was one, yeah, Puerto Rico, because it's Port of Rico. That's what it is, Puerto Rico. It's like Portugal. And now if you spell out Portugal, you know, the Portgual, Port of Gaul, Puerto Rico, rich port. Those names named after those things, stuff like that. One big story, but whatever the case may be. So, yeah. So, yeah, Cortez came back, let him know, like, look, Florida is not an island, my boy. You ain't seen what that land got to offer, right? You only saw a bit. Let's go check the rest out, right? So Ponce got excited, and they got some ships, right? They embarked. Almost the whole of his property he took with him. At length he arrived at the wished-for land and made descent upon the coast with a great with a great part of his men. But the Indians sallied forth with unusual valor to defend their shores. A bloody battle ensued. Several Spaniards were slain, and Ponce wounded by an arrow in the thigh. He was borne on board his ship, and finding himself disabled for further action, sailed for Cuba, where he died soon after his arrival. Right? So Ponce's life ended with seeing he when people say you F around and you find out, Ponce F'd around and he found out, right? Son could have called it quits and retired and lived a good life, but no, he let Cortez soup him up. They slid over here to America and got packed up, right? He got packed, he F'd around and he found out. Went back to Cuba, probably died 2 months later. Right? Stress, all that stress, man. It's a lot of stress. So, like I said, I don't have time to go through this part of the book where we speak about Juan Ponce De Leon and the history of Puerto Rico. So, we just going to skim through it. And then I'm going to touch bases on this one and the next one because it gives us a lot more information, the things that was going on. You know, but like we learned, you know, we already know Columbus forgot about the island. Ponce took it over just to just to touch bases. Check this part out. So, as far as Columbus himself is concerned, the island was certainly forgotten amid the troubles that beset him on all sides, almost from the day of his second landing in La Española, right? From 1493 to 1500, a series of insurrections broke out, headed successfully by Diaz, Margarit, Agudo, Roldan, and others, supported by the convict rabble that on the admiral's own proposals to the authorities in Spain had been liberated from the galleys and prisons on condition that they should join him on his third expedition. When the Moors got to hit Hispaniola, they broke out. Let's do it. We not on European land no more. We don't have to follow behind the Inquisition. We don't got to stand for none of that stuff. Let's do it. Let's get to work. Let's get it on. Right? And like I said, you could tell who they speaking about, because just check this out. These insurrectionists, first off, they're Spanish last names, right? Not Africans, right? These were the same people that were liberated from the galleys and prisons on condition that they should join him on his third expedition. Like I said, right? Like I said, the admiral is Columbus. Columbus was a prisoner himself, right? These folks were the conversos. These were the conversos. Right? Those were the conversos. I'm just saying. See, look, Guayabana, Agahana, Guayabana, like the same people, right? Puerto Rico had a lot of caciques. Look, here we go. Capara, right? It's a lot. Like Puerto Rico having good gold, but not as good as the gold in Hispaniola. The gold was smelted in the Sade and found to be 100 maravedís per peso fine, which was not as fine as the gold obtained in La Española. Right, look, like I said, they were supplied with provisions, were held in honor in a practice common among many of the aboriginal tribes in different parts of the world, of exchanging names with the visitor as a mark of brotherly affection, was also resorted to cement the new bonds of friendship, so that Guayabana became Ponce for the first time, and being Ponce Guayabana. So Juan Ponce Guayabana. That's who they speaking about, like they mentioned in the article, well, this part of the book that we read. So Guayabana and Agahana, same person, different name. Stories is aligning though. But like I just made mention of, who was the people that came with Columbus? Those were Moors. And when they got here, they broke out. So the next time somebody tell you that Toussaint Louverture is an African, just think about it. Well, when they got to Hispaniola, or when every time these people would get to Hispaniola, they would break out. They always finding allies on Haiti. And Haiti, right? The real land of milk and honey, right? The land of rebellion. Right? And of course, they fought side by side with the Taino Arawak people. But like I said, I don't have enough time. And Florida was huge, sis. Florida was huge. I ain't gonna lie. Florida was huge. But yeah, they souped that man up. I ain't gonna lie. They souped him up. Got him to go all the way to Florida. And once he got more in mainland, he got packed up. They got packed up and sent back home. And he died. Very crazy story. But I'm going to go over this one and the next one, because it's the same story, but they're leaving some things out, right? They're not telling us that Columbus slid over here with these insurrectionists, right? These convicts, these people liberated from the galleys and prisons, right? These conversos, right? A converso, someone who is a Jew who converted to Catholicism in Spain or Portugal, particularly during the 14th and 15th centuries, right? This was following the Christian Reconquista, and it had all of the remaining Jews to join or face exile. You know, lock you up, or you get kicked out of the nation. Right? The Moriscos were of Muslim origin. So you have Moriscos and conversos. And I conclude that one for y'all right there, man. I hope that this one was extremely informative because, listen, I'm doing this just to show the people of Puerto Rico some love, bro. Like, the love, we all deserve a little bit of love. And what would connect us is just sharing that love, that light. You know, I'm tired of hearing Caribbean people say they not black. I get it. You not black. You Caribbean. That's a fact. But one thing that our culture does share in common is the trauma. And we rebuild by uniting. And if we have to unite through the trauma, then so be it. Well, that's how we gonna come together. So I encourage all my bodies, right? Watch this video. Watch this series. Learn a little bit more about your country, where you come from, right? Who your ancestors are, right? Who the real bad guy is, number one, right? Because Ponce, he's the real jerk, right? Let's just be real, and just learn more about the history and what created the culture that the people live under today, right? Like I say, America, Western civilization, is an offshoot of Eastern civilization. However they were living in Europe before they established America is how we would have been living, as how we living now. We just added our own little twist to it. Hip hop and the black culture. We added our own little twist to it. But nothing changed, right? We still glorify the same negative stuff that they've been glorifying in Europe all these years. Ever since the Roman times, like the Roman Colosseum. Sports, gladiator sports, the music, right? Pornography, all of that stuff. All of that stuff is a lot. Can't even go too deep into it, man. But listen, Juan Ponce from Leon and the Repartimientos, the true rightful slave master of the island, the true conqueror, the true colonizer, the discoverer of Florida, right? The man who got souped up, got shot in his leg for screwing around and finding out. He effed around and found out. I hope y'all appreciated this one. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. And I appreciate y'all for tuning in to this one. I got 41 folks to start this one off that I had today. 41. I think personally, on my own platform, that is a milestone. I think that's because we have milestone thoughts in the building. It's a possibility. But either way, though, man, 41. I appreciate it. It's all love on this side. We're going to be back with another one. I'm going to be dropping videos way more frequently now. And if you have not yet, because I got a new one coming out. We got a whole new one coming out. This one will be dropping October 15th. But if you have not yet, make sure you go to Amazon. Check out the Copper Colors coloring book. You know, get you your copy. It's dope. I mean, I love them. I love them. Like, I've been coloring these bad boys ever since I got my hands on them. And I just keep coloring the same ones back to back. And it's only because I got two. But the new one that we introducing on the 15th is the coloring book for a copper colored companion. So this is a animal coloring book, you know, for dogs. I got a Yorkie. So this is a tribute to him. And I consider him to be my emotional support animal. Because when I'm going through it, my boy right there by my side. You got to love y'all animals, man. Love your pets. Because they've been there with us from the start, right? Dog spelled backwards is God. God is the most high, and then y'all we trust, man. I'm going to leave it right there. Tune into the next one. Copper Color King. We out.